there I go. Here I am. What is going on, everybody? And welcome to the Thursday edition of the Stochastic NHL Playoff Strategy Show. I am your host, Josh Harris. Another four-gamer here tonight. They've been alternating 4-3, 4-3. Some pretty interesting games last night. Kings absolutely bullied the Oilers. The surprising one to me was Dallas winning in overtime in Colorado with Gabriel Landeskog coming back. Colorado looked insanely flat for how much energy was in that building at the start of that game. And what was the other game? I don't even remember the other game.
Montreal.
Oh, yeah. They're right there. That game was really close. You know, if you want to be glass half full and inhale the copium, the series isn't over until you lose home ice. But Patrick Laine didn't take a shift in the third there. I saw some people talking about scratching Laine and putting in Oliver Kapanen. It's just like, if you're going to go down with the ship, go down with Patrick Laine instead of Oliver Kapanen. If you don't want to play him at 5-on-5, fine. If you take him out, who are you putting there on the power play? Ivan Demidov, fine, but he's not Patrick Laine on the power play. So lots of galaxy branding going on there. But 4 games here tonight. 3 of the 4 they're switching cities, so it does give us a little bit more to talk about, a little bit different angle. Joining me to break it down in his Robert Bertuzzi jersey, Slim Cliffy. What's going on?
Yeah, not a whole lot. Yeah, unfortunate. Montreal lost again last night. First game was in overtime. Last night was 3-1, but the empty netter came with like literally 1 second left. So it is what it is. One of those things where Montreal's in the games. The Caps have been the better team, but they've capitalized on a couple more chances than Montreal has. So that's the way it goes. I don't think anybody necessarily expected the Habs to win the series. It would be nice to see them win one on home ice. We'll see how that goes. The Kings are, man, they're looking really, really good. You and I were talking about it before the show. Like, the one thing that was really holding this Kings team back from being separated, the thing that separated them from all the great teams in the West or in the league, generally speaking, was their power play. I think they had the 3rd lowest power play percentage in the league this season, 3rd lowest power play goals per game this season. You can play great defense. You can be good at 5-on-5. If you can't score on the power play, then if you go into those dry spells at even strength, there's just nothing that can support you. And they've had a pretty good power play since Andrei Kuzmenko joined the team. And if they honestly have even a league average power play now, it completely changes the outlook of the Kings, and I think makes them legit Stanley Cup contenders. The series that's surprising, you mentioned it, is Dallas, Colorado. With Heiskanen out, with Robertson out, even Nils Lundqvist, like, he's not a key piece of the team, but he was a good third pair guy. Like, it got to the point where they had to, they're scratching Matt Dumba, who they signed to a multi-year contract in the offseason so they can play an AHLer because Dumba was so bad. Like, that would be the spot that Lundqvist would be in. Even without all those players, they've been the better team in 2 out of the 3 games, like, legitimately. And Colorado's healthy. Colorado has all their guys now. And they have not, generally speaking, in that series, have not looked good. Like, you do have to give Dallas some measure of credit. Colorado's got to figure something out, or else that's probably going to be one of the biggest busts in recent playoff memory, honestly. When you think about a team with that much talent, finally getting healthy, facing a team decimated by injuries, if they get bounced, that's a huge, huge missed opportunity. But that was last night. Tonight is tonight. 4 games on the board. 3 of them changing locales. Toronto heading to Ottawa, just down the road. I mean, just down the road. It's a few-hour drive, like a 3-hour drive. Vegas is going to Minnesota. Winnipeg's going to St. Louis, and we have game 2 between Florida and Tampa Bay. Interesting matchups, a bunch of 5.5 totals. Vegas not necessarily expecting a ton of goals here tonight. I mean, the gamblers, I don't mean the hockey players. So the hockey players might be here tonight too. So really interesting matchups, especially when they switch cities, because now a new team gets to dictate matchups. We'll see how things go, and we'll definitely take our time going through them game by game.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because like of these series switching spots, like I don't think the matchups are really going to change too much. But we'll talk about it. 4.5 hour drive. He's just made it. That's like from where I live to Baltimore. Yeah, Cliffy has the I was going to say the Mandalorian, but it is the DeLorean, and he just has a heavy foot. That's what happens when you live in the Atlantic Ocean with 13 other people. There's one sheriff occupied for the other 12, so you can drive really fast. Let's get into this slate. Before we do, 125 of you still hanging out with us into the playoffs. You guys are a little bit cuckoo. But if you do want to support us further, you can click the link in the chat. I have disconnected. I have reconnected. Listen, I don't really have to read the ad read. You guys know if you want to support us further, you click the link in the chat. Let's get into this slate as my internet decides to buffer and buffer and buffer. I got the Wheel of Death. Don't cover her with your shoulder. I'm sorry. Here. There we go. This way. Tampa, Florida. Tampa Bay Lightning. The Florida Panthers are heading. We're off to a roaring start here. The Florida Panthers are in Tampa Bay for Game 2 against the Lightning. Looks like for Tampa, Cirelli is a game-time decision. He got hurt in the first game. I honestly have no idea if he was going to play. John Cooper said something to the effect like he's going to take warm-ups, and if the doctors clear him, he's going to play. That doesn't sound great, but we'll have to wait and see. It is a big loss. I don't think there's anyone more important on the defensive side for Tampa than Anthony Cirelli. Even Brandon Hagel without Cirelli, his defensive numbers slide. So like this would be a brutal loss if Cirelli is out. Again, like that still wouldn't give me a ton of interest in Florida one. Like I know Reinhardt scored. They had a decent game. But 19,000 when you can get that second line for $2,100 cheaper, still have Tkachuk on the top power play. They have had better numbers together. They'll have a better matchup. So, like, Florida one's fine, but 19K is a bit steep for me, especially when you have Tampa one sitting right there, who have been much better throughout the season. It would be Florida 2 for me. Bennett, Samoskevich, Tkachuk coming in at 2% projected at 16,900. If Cirelli's out, people are going to have to start moving in places they don't want to be in. It's going to be a problem. The more you go down the lineup, that Tkachuk line will see secondary matchups. Probably that point Kucherov line. It's fine defensively, nothing to write home about. So I'm in more on Florida 2 than Florida 1. If you want to play Florida 1, that's a little bit more of an MME type deal for me. But I was a little bit wrong on Florida the other night. They came out and they steamrolled Vasilevsky. I would imagine he tightens the ship a little bit. If Cirelli's out, he could be under siege a little bit more, so he has to be on top of his game. But for me, Florida 2. On the Tampa side, again, we'll have to wait and see on Cirelli. The one thing that really stood out to me in Game 1 was how good Tampa was when Jake Gensel was on the ice. He was probably their best skater. If Cirelli's in, I don't mind going back to Cirelli, Hagel, Gensel. Gensel will take some spins with Point and Kucherov. He is on the top power play unit. The Panthers do take a fair share of penalties. So maybe, irregardless if Cirelli plays or not, I think you could do like a Kucherov Gensel 2-man, Hagel Gensel 2-man, something like that. Hagel and Gensel are both on the top units, so you don't have to worry about that there. So I don't know if I'd full stack anything on Tampa. I like, if I would, it would be Tampa 1 at 19,100, 24% top 2 stack, 18.6% projected ownership. Is a bit worrisome, but if, I don't mind it because you do get 2 guys on the top power play unit, including Kucherov, who is the most important. But for me, honestly, I think in this game, it's both second lines for me. And if you do want to play Tampa 2, just be around at lock to see if Cirelli's playing.
Yeah, and thing about lock is game starts early tonight. I think lock is at 6:30 Eastern. So if you're normally sitting down at 6:30 Eastern to look for some NHL news, the slate will already be locked by then. So just keep in mind that it's half an hour early tonight. A couple things about game one. One, Florida scored 3 power play goals. I was looking at Tampa's season. Tampa hadn't given up more than 1 power play goal against in a game since October. They did it. It happened twice all season where they gave up 2 power play goals against, and they were both in October, both in like the first 3 weeks of the season. They hadn't happened in 6 months. So like, I would consider game one a bit of an aberration more than anything else. The other is, it's clear Matt Tkachuk is still injured. And it's funny to say that because he had 2 goals and an assist. It's like, this guy's just an absolute freak. But both times he scored, when he went through the bench, like to, high five or whatever, he reached across his body so he could use his left hand. He wouldn't use his right hand to go along the bench. So clearly there's something with his right shoulder, right arm, whatever it is. So it's one of those things, like, I don't like playing players that I know are injured. And like this time of year, everybody's injured to some degree, right? But we know Tkachuk is pretty hurt, considering he can't even high five people with his right hand. And I say that as he's coming off a game with 2 goals and assists. So it's really hard to know what to make of Florida. Like, I really didn't like him in the last game. I didn't think Tampa really played that poorly. It's kind of the Ottawa thing, where at even strength, like, the game was fairly close, and on the power play, they just got completely ran over. I don't think that's going to happen again to Tampa. I do think Florida has 3 playable lines. I think this is a case where I mentioned it the last time Carolina was on the slate, that I wouldn't build, if I was playing single entry, I wouldn't build around Carolina. And I think it's the same thing with Florida here tonight. Like, I'm not building my single entry around Florida, but if I put in a goalie, put in a stack, put in a cheap defenseman, and I'm looking for a secondary stack, then I think Florida would be playable. That's when you look like, do I need a mid-price stack? Okay, I'll play Florida 2. Do I need a filler stack? Okay, I'll play Florida 3. Samoskevich and Bennett, you mentioned Florida 2. They were pretty good together this season. 67 shot attempts, 2.9 expected goals per 60 minutes. Brad Marchand and Anton Lundell played pretty well together in a small sample. A little over 60 minutes, 73 shot attempts, 3.1 expected goals, 2.8 actual goals per 60. Now, you don't get anybody on the power play, and given what we saw in game one, or on the top power play, I should say, given what we saw in game one, that really sucks. But I do think Florida 3 is very playable, especially if Cirelli's out. Because if Cirelli's out, now you got, Nick Paul or Yanni Gord's probably back down on the third line. Like, Nick Paul's in the second line or whatever. Like, it makes the bottom 6 worse because they have to move Nick Paul out of it. So I do think it gives Florida 3 a good matchup. I think I do have some interest in Florida 3 as a filler. I know Florida's scored 3 power play goals. I'm really not expecting that again. So I think I'm looking for the cheap players from Florida rather than going after like the top line. I think the second line is perfectly fine. Like I said, Samoskevich and Bennett we're good together this season. Certainly adding Matthew Tkachuk is not going to hurt, and they're going to avoid the shutdown matchups. So, check marks across the board for Florida 2, but I think I have interest in Florida 3 here. On the Tampa side, like, we have to see what happens, like who's in Cirelli's spot if Cirelli's out, whether Cirelli is in. Like, Gonçalves being on the top line, it's one of those things, like if Cirelli's out and Gonçalves is on the top line, like I don't know if he lasts on the top line, or does Tampa Bay just kind of cycle 2 pairs of forwards or 3 pairs of forwards basically all game and use the other forwards around them, and all the top guys played 19 to 23 minutes. That's kind of it. I don't have a tremendous amount of interest in Tampa Bay. I would probably go back to the top line, point Kucherov, X, whoever it ends up being, whether it's Gord, whether it's Gonçalves, whether it's somebody else. They're probably not good. They're not going to see a ton. Assuming Cirelli's in, they're not going to see a ton of the Florida top line. They're going to get a lot of minutes. Point and Kucherov have basically been able to score regardless of who the third wheel is on the other side. With Yanni Gord there in top stacks, they're at 24.8% top 2 stack. It's the third highest on the board. So I think for me in this game, it's Tampa 1, Florida 3, and I think Florida 2 is very playable.
Yeah, I just want to mention the minutes for a couple people just so we can manage expectations here. Anthony Cirelli played 6 minutes before he got hurt in game 1. Goncalves played over 20, so he may stick. The only people to play more were Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov. On the Panthers side, I do like Florida too. I want to just say that. But buyer beware. That third line, quote unquote, got second line minutes. Bennett, Samoskevich, and Tkachuk all played around 12 minutes. Lundell played 17:29. Luosterainen played 16:32. Marchand played 17:15. So these guys on the third line are playing a lot more. Bennett played 11:50. Tkachuk played 11:43, and Samoskevich played 12:35. And that's with power plays. So they had a lot of power plays. So that it's kind of how they did it last year as well. That Lundell Luosterainen pair last year was getting 15, 16 minutes consistently. So for that, Cliffy's point about Florida 3 is a really good one because they get heavy minutes. So just wanted to put that out there and be you touted Florida 2, but they played 11:50 and they didn't do anything. Just buyer beware if you are going to use that line. Toronto, the Maple Leafs, they're making that 4.5-hour drive, 3 hours if you are Slim Cliffy, heading into Toronto, into Ottawa to face the Sens for Game 3. The Leafs are up 2-0 in that series. Obviously, the first game in Ottawa here. Not sure it changes the matchups too much. The lines are pretty much the same. The only difference for Toronto is Nick Robertson is out. Max Pacioretty he hasn't played since the beginning of February? Something like that?
He was injured, and then he came back, and they just never brought him in. He hasn't played since the Four Nations.
Yeah, so we'll see how healthy he is. He will be on the third line with Domi and McMahon. We'll get to that in a second. Toronto 1, again, is the most expensive line on the night at 22,100. They have the second highest top 2 stack on the night at 27.6%, and they're coming in projected under 10% ownership here. That's a little bit interesting to me. It is a 4-game slate, and of the lines, the top 4 of all the lines with a 20% or top 2 stack higher, there's 4 of them. The lowest is the Leafs at 8.7%, and then they have Winnipeg 1 at 13.9%. So this is a low-owned Toronto 1 here. Ottawa's going to take penalties. It's just what they do. Linus Ullmark has not looked great in this series. I don't mind going to Toronto 1 here. It's like, it's the Matty Nyes conundrum, right? It's like, do I really want to pay that price on Nyes for a $22,000 line? In single entry, I'm not going to do it. But like in MME here tonight, getting this line under 10% projected, it feels pretty good. So like, I don't mind Toronto 1 here. But again, like if I'm building in single entry, I'm building around the power play guys, which is obviously line 1. But the one that is really important to me is Willie Nylander. John Tavares has looked great in this series, so I'm more likely to go like Tavares, Nylander, Matthews than just straight up full stack Toronto 1 in single entry. Again, in MME, Toronto 1 is a pretty good leverage play, but I'm more likely to go like Tavares, Nylander, Matthews, Nylander, Marner, something like that. The Ottawa side's still pretty interesting. Stützle, Giroux, Tkachuk, 16,400, 13.5% projected ownership. Like, again, like I don't particularly love that line. They've had trouble creating all season. I don't particularly love that ownership. So, like, even though they're in a different location, I have the same analysis on the Sens. I'm going to go Cousins, Batherson. And if you want to add in a third guy, you can leave off Perron and add a Tkachuk for more power play time. The Leafs did take a lot of penalties in game 2. The Sens did not capitalize on it. Salaries has been pretty good. But again, like the Leafs don't look great in their own zone. So if like there's ever a game where they're going to break through, it's always game 3 you always have to worry about for the team up 2-0. That's a really bad like PvP stat, but it just seems like a fun time to mention it. But like for me, I'd go Cousins, Batherson, Perron. If you want to add in Tkachuk or Stützle for more power play time, fine. I don't mind that third line as a filler either. Greek, Pinto, Amadio. I don't think you need all 3 of them, but if you want to go like Greek, Pinto, because you want to do something with the Wild power play, for example, or something, I think they're fine. But for me, it's Toronto power play, Ottawa too.
Yeah, we'll have to watch for warm-up here. It was another one of those morning skates where Ridley Greig and Nick Jensen weren't skating. We expect that they'll play. They also had Zetterlund skating with Cousins and Batherson. We have seen at times since they acquired Zetterlund where he'll like practice on the top line and then the next game rolls around and he's back on the fourth line or whatever. Like they've done that. So we'll see at warm-ups what happens. But I think regardless in this game, this is a special team series, right? Yeah. The Leafs 5-4 power play unit in the regular season was at 12.5 goals per 60 minutes. That's elite. Like that's Tampa Bay, Edmonton stuff. So that it's an elite power play. Now, Ottawa's wasn't as good, but they were something like 20% above the league average for a top power play unit. Like they were pretty good in their own right. Both penalty kills suck. Neither team is, Stolarz has looked pretty good this series. The Leafs defense has not. It's kind of the reverse for Ottawa, where like Allmark hasn't looked that great, but Ottawa's actually been fine defensively at even strength anyway, and certainly not on the penalty kill. So I would absolutely focus on the power play guys on either side, regardless of what I do. Like Max Pacioretty coming back is nice. Like I'm a Pacioretty guy. Like obviously Montreal for most of his career. He was on a bit of a slide after Christmas. Like he started the season strong, like the first 6 weeks, 2 months, whatever, and then went on a slide and then got hurt and now hasn't played in 10 weeks. Like sometimes I'm kind of into playing Toronto 3. This isn't one of those instances. So it's the power play guys on either side for me. The interesting thing is like when Ottawa's at home or has been at home over the last couple months, they've been using that Pinto Greig Amadio line as a shutdown line. So that would get Stützle and Tkachuk and them away from the Austin Matthews matchup. And I think that's probably a pretty good thing for that Ottawa top line. I'm not super keen on the Sens here, but doing like a Tkachuk, Stützle, Batherson, like 3-man or Tkachuk, Stützle, Cousins, like something like that. like building around Kachuk for sure, probably Stützle just because they are correlated at all strengths. And then adding one of Batherson or Cousins is probably the way I would go about it here tonight. Like Kachuk, he has the fourth highest projection for any winger here tonight. Highest of any winger in this game. He was an assist and a shot bonus in the last game, or a goal and a shot bonus. So he's finding ways to be productive. Stützle, the one thing that worries me is that Stützle is not really getting the 21 minutes that he's gotten for most of the last 3 years. It's closer to 19, which really sucks because he's not a guy that thrives on efficiency. He thrives on volume. But I really don't mind doing like a Stützle, Kachuk, X, whether it's Cousins, whether it's Batherson. That's how I'd approach this game. Honestly, if you want to play Ottawa 3, I think they're playable just because they're 11,200. And if they're getting the shutdown matchups against Matthews, plus, some sparse power play time or penalty kill time or whatever, they're going to play upwards of 16, 17 minutes. And at 11,200 at home, I don't think you can ask for much more than that. So I don't mind them as a filler, but it's the Ottawa power play guys that I really focus on. Same thing on the Toronto side. I talked about how good the Toronto power play was in the regular season after they switched to the 5-4 power play. We've certainly seen the results of that, 4 power play goals in the first 2 games. Ottawa only took 1 penalty in the last game, and Toronto scored in 18 seconds. And that was the longest that it took them to score a power play goal in this series. So build around Matthews, Matthews, Tavares, Nylander, Matthews, Marner, Nylander, whatever you want to do. That's the way I would approach it. Just build around Matthews. He has the highest projection for any center here tonight by nearly 2 full DK points. Second highest projection of any player on the board. So it's just the power play guys, maybe Ottawa 3 if you really need a filler.
Yeah, they're the first team to really make the 5-4 power play work consistently. But, hoping the Sens win this game just to make it a series. Get a little sweat on those Leafs fans. But anyway, let's move on to the next game. The Vegas Golden Knights are heading into the Twin Cities to visit with our boss, Jake Hari, and to maybe face the Minnesota Wild. Game 3 here. This series is tied 1 apiece. Minnesota won game 2, 5-2. Minnesota only had 17 shots on goal. Scored on 5 of them. I don't think Vegas played awful. They just, untimely goaltending there. Here's the issue that let me read you the lines first. Minnesota going Kaprizov, Boldy, Eriksson, Ek, Zuccarello, Johansson, Gaudreau, Hartman, Nyquist, Foligno, and then Rossi, Trennan, Brazeau. Vegas going Eichel, Stone, Howden, Hurdle, Dorofeyev, Saad, Carlson, Smith, Olsen.
I think it's they're moving Barbashev back up on the top line for this one. But it's one of those things he might not last the first period.
Yeah, and here's the issue, right? This game was 3-0 Minnesota after the first period. Eichel played 16:34. Mark Stone led the way for all skaters, 17-17. Not a single skater was above 17 minutes besides Mark Stone.
Yeah, and just to jump in real quick, they've only had 2 power plays in those 2 games, so that's part of it. But by the same token, Minnesota's only had 2 power plays in those 2 games, and Matt Boldy's averaged almost 22 minutes a game. Yep. Coaches find ways to get their top players more ice time. Bruce Cassidy is not doing that with Vegas. At least he hasn't in the first 2 games.
Yeah, he's rolling 4 lines. That's just the Bruce Cassidy way.
Victor Olofsson. I think Victor Olofsson is at 14.25 a game at 5-on-5, and Jack Eichel is at 14.45. 20 seconds difference between Jack Eichel and Victor Olofsson at 5-on-5 per game.
Don't let the Boston media hear that. Or the Buffalo. What am I? But anyway, now that this is in Minnesota, I do wonder if they're going to send out Hartman, Nyquist, Foligno against the Eichel line. I know that they like sending Eriksson Ek out against top competition, but when he's with Kaprizov and Boldy, maybe not. And like at points, I thought maybe it would be the Freddie Gaudreau line, but like they played the Foligno line, the Hartman Foligno line, like as their second line, basically. So maybe. I don't think it tremendously changes the matchups because the Eriksson, Ek, Boldy, Kaprizov all are going to play 20 minutes plus here tonight. They're 20,300. They have the highest top two of the night at 29.6%, 20% projected ownership. The problem is like Vegas is really good defensively. Like they held Minnesota to 17 shots on goal. Like Kaprizov and Boldy are playing great, but like it takes ridiculous passing from the two of them. Like I don't mind them. Don't get me wrong, but at that ownership, at that price, I'm just gonna go power play stack Toronto. If we're gonna call a spade here, I'm fine with the Kaprizov one off, a Boldy Kaprizov 2-man. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think I'm gonna full stack at 20,300. You can. Don't get me wrong. I don't think that whoever starts in net for Vegas is going to play that poorly. Again, like Cliff, you mentioned Minnesota's only gotten 2 power plays. Vegas just doesn't take penalties. It would be a Minnesota 1 game just because they play a ton of minutes. By the same token, if you do need a filler line, if you are doing some sort of like crazy Toronto power play stack or something like that, I think 2-man of Hartman Foligno is fine. They both played almost, I think Hartman was above 17 minutes and Foligno was right around 17 minutes. That whole line is 9,100. So like, I don't mind them as a 2-man. It is Minnesota 1. They're not my favorite. I'd rather play Toronto, but like, I don't mind at least 1 or 2 of them. On the Vegas side, like, it's just a minutes thing, right? 15-6 for the Eichel line. It's going to be a little bit more if it is Barbashev up there. 15-2 for the Dorofeyev line. Like Hertl and Dorofeyev played 16 minutes. Eichel 16 minutes. Stone 17 minutes. At that point, like I'm just going to go down to Carlson, Smith, Olofsson at 11,700 if they're going to get 14 minutes. Like really, I want to play Eichel, Stone, Barbashev. If this was like the regular season and they were getting their 20, 21 minutes, but they're not. If anything, on the Vegas side, it's Carlson, Smith, and Olofsson. If you want to one-off like a Dorofeyev or something, fine. But like the only thing I have interest in stacking on the Vegas side is the third line.
Yeah, I'll start on the Minnesota side. I will say, like Kaprizov looks like, November Kaprizov again, right? Like, it feels like a lifetime ago now, but it's like up until Christmas when he got hurt, he was arguably the front runner for the Hart Trophy. You know what I mean? Like he was, if not the front runner, then top 3 for MVP in the first 2.5 months of the season, and then he got hurt. I was looking at their numbers so far in the playoffs. 88 shot attempts per 60 minutes. Now they've only played about 35 minutes together, but creating a lot of shots at any rate. I wonder how the matchup is going to go because they obviously haven't had these specific lines in a home game since before Christmas. And that was over 4 months ago. The game was over 4 months ago. So I don't really know how things are going to go here. There have been times where Vegas 1 has struggled a little bit defensively, but everybody's healthy. I wouldn't expect that. I think Minnesota 1 is pretty playable because they do get a lot of minutes. They'll be able to dictate matchups, and they're also a couple grand cheaper than Toronto. Like that's actually kind of a big deal, right? Where we're playing in a DFS ecosystem on DK where punt defensemen really don't exist anymore. Every few $100s you can save on a stack is really important, to get you from the $3,000 16-minute guy to a $4,000 guy who's actually going to play, things like that. So saving $2,000 is pretty viable, or is pretty important, makes them viable. I would I think I'm with you. I would still lean Toronto, even though they are like 10% more expensive, but don't really mind Minnesota 1. But honestly, I think this is a spot where I would attack them for fillers, and it is Hartman and Gaudreau, or Hartman and Foligno, sorry, that I would look to. Foligno scored in the last game. Hartman's averaged 16 minutes in the first 2 games. I think Foligno's at like 15. So like they're getting some ice time. They're basically the second line.
They're playing the same amount of Eichel.
Yeah, basically. Ryan Hartman and Jack Eichel are playing the same amount of minutes. Gaudreau and Foligno and Hartman this season, 2.4 expected goals, 2.4 actual goals. I mentioned it on the last show. That's about league average. Getting league average scoring from a quote third line is pretty good. So I do like a 2-man of like Hartman and Foligno. If you want a 3-man, stack them because you need to. I think that's fine, but I would prefer 2-man. So I think it's the cheap Minnesota guys I prefer. On the Vegas side, 16,900. Like the minutes drop is kind of priced in. Like if they play around 17 minutes for around 17K, I think that's fine. Because at that point, like if they get, one correlated goal and another goal, somebody has a shot bonus, then you're kind of fine. But I'm not convinced Barbashev is going to last the whole game. Like he only lasted like 3 shifts in game 2 on the top line, and Brett Howden was moved up. Like he was moved up. Brett Howden was moved to the top line by like the 10-minute mark of the first period. Now, Minnesota, I think, was up 2-0 or something already at that point. So that's probably part of it. But, if they're not going to play, if there's not even a threat of playing, it's not as if like they played 19 and a half minutes in game 1 and then fell behind by a lot in game 2. So they only played 16 and a half minutes or whatever. It's like, no, they only played 17 minutes in game 1 as well. It's like whether they're winning, whether they're losing, those guys, it seems like they're only going to play 17 minutes. So I would probably go to Hurdledorf, Faven side. It was their best line post 4 Nations break. So over the final 2 months of the regular season. In the playoffs, 42-21 shot attempts with Vegas 2 on the ice. 1.3 expected goals to 1 expected for to 1 expected goal against. Like they've been fairly dominant in their ice time. I think that's why it's the one line that you haven't really seen broken up very much as long as everybody's been healthy. So I go back to Hurldorf, Faven side. If they do use like Gaudreau or whomever in a shutdown matchup, they'll avoid Jonas Brodin, like all that stuff. I think that's fairly important for this specific matchup. So I think for me, this game is Vegas 2. I don't mind Minnesota 3 if you're playing like expensive Toronto, Tampa Bay, something like that.
Yeah. It's just weird that Bruce Cassidy, like they were down 3-0 and they're just like, you know what, we're rolling 4 lines. At least he's being consistent at least. That's all you can ask, I guess. Let's get to this last game of the night, and it's on at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, not in the middle of the damn night. The Winnipeg Jets taking the trip into St. Louis. And listen, if we're being completely honest, you guys know how I feel about Long Island. St. Louis is a miserable place. So that sucks for everyone involved. Sorry, Haas. You know it's true. St. Louis sucks. Winnipeg going Connor, Scheifele, Iafallo, Perfidi, Niederreiter, Nemestikov, Lowry, Appleton, Tanev. Blues are going Thomas Buchnevich, Snuggerud, Kyrou, Neighbors, Shen. And then, the bottom 6, whatever. There's a lot of ownership on the Blues here. It's kind of price-driven. Thomas Buchnevich, Snuggerud, 14,200. 17.9% projected ownership. Kyrou, Neighbors, Shen, 18.4% projected ownership. I would imagine they're going to send out Thomas Buchnevich against Scheifele. I would think even with Snuggerud. I just don't think they're going to send out Shen without Holloway. Yeah, you agree?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't think they don't like using Jordan Kyrou in shutdown matchups specifically, and they're not going to send out the third or fourth line At least, maybe a shift or two, but I think it'll be pretty consistently Thomas Buchnevich, Snuggerud.
Yeah. So if, Thomas is going out against the top line, the second line going out against the second and third lines, I am out on Shen Neighbors. Kyrou at 18.4%. They just haven't been great together this season anyway without Holloway. That ownership's ridiculous. The middle six of Winnipeg is destroying the middle six of St. Louis. So 18.4%, I'm out. 14,200 for Thomas Buchnevich Snuggerud is at least interesting. Like Scheifele, Connor, Velarde, who's not back. They're not back. He's still in a non-contact jersey. He's with the team. But that line specifically was their worst, quote-unquote, worst defensive line. With Iafallo there, it's similar-ish numbers. So, if anything on the blue side, it would be that top line, and it's kind of price-driven at 14,200. They're, the same price as Vegas, too. I just go play Vegas, too. But 14,200, I think, in MME, I would have a little bit there. This is the first game in St. Louis. So, before game 2, I was saying they were trying to hide Snuggerud. He actually looked pretty decent up there with Thomas Buchnevich in game 2, eating some crow there. So it would be St. Louis 1, probably MME only, out on St. Louis 2 and 3. On the Winnipeg side, I do like Winnipeg 1 at 18.7, Connor Scheifele, Iafallo. The problem is, and it's not an Alex Iafallo problem, even though he didn't have a great game 2, is this second line, Perfidi, Niederreiter, Nemestikov at 11,400. They have been running over the middle six of St. Louis. So if you're looking for depth on this slate, my favorite 2 depth lines are Winnipeg's second and third line. So, I don't want to Josh stack Winnipeg here tonight. So, in my single entry, I'm more likely to use depth from Winnipeg than build around Winnipeg 1. Now, I think Winnipeg 1 is certainly fine. The Blues can't kill a penalty. Scheifele, Connor, Iafallo, all on the top unit. They have a 20% top 2 stack coming in at 14% projected ownership. I'd much rather play Winnipeg 1 at 14% projected ownership than St. Louis 2 at 18%. That is for damn sure. But this middle six has been, and it's not like rocket surgery that I'm breaking this news. The middle six of the Winnipeg Jets are the difference in this series. They have been disgusting. So, if I'm looking for depth, I'm going to Nemestikov, Niederreiter, Perfidi. If you need more savings, I'm going to some form of Lowry, Appleton, Tanev. Now, if you are using that third line, I don't think you need all 3. I think a Lowry, Appleton, or Lowry, Tanev is just fine. Lowry's always out there on the empty net. He plays 15, 16 minutes. But, if you do need a depth stack, it would be Winnipeg 2. So, I have no issues with Winnipeg 1 here tonight. If you're not using Winnipeg 1 and you need a depth line, I am absolutely going to Winnipeg 2 or 3. On the St. Louis side, I think Winnipeg 1 or St. Louis 1 is fine. It's just more of an MME type deal.
Yeah. Talked about it in the Discord earlier today. In the 2 games in Winnipeg, the Winnipeg middle six, the second and third lines played. It was a little around 39 minutes, so I just put 40 minutes. 0.6 combined expected goals against in those 40 minutes. If you extrapolate their shot attempts and expected goals against per 60 in those 2 games, it's 30 shot attempts and 0.9 expected goals against. They just completely shut down St. Louis's middle six, completely. The top line wasn't that great. But compared to how the second and third lines did, they look like absolute offensive wizards. Now, they're going back to St. Louis. St. Louis can dictate matchups, but I don't think a whole lot's going to change. No. St. Louis is going to send out their top line against Winnipeg's top line, as Winnipeg did when they were in Winnipeg. It'll be second lines and third lines facing off against each other again. Now, maybe St. Louis, for whatever reason, I think they're scratching Ryan Suter, but at least
he's going to go 11-7.
He stayed on with scratches. Yeah, they'll probably go 11-7. maybe, they bring in a different forward. Like, honestly, it doesn't really matter. Like, we were worried about Winnipeg losing Velarde and Ehlers because of what it would do to their offense. And Scheifele and Connor have been good enough to score enough goals to win them a couple games. They're completely shutting down St. Louis. It's the absolute opposite of last year. Like, last year, they were basically like a revolving door on defense, and Colorado was just skating circles around them. This year, St. Louis can't do anything. So, like, I think kind of by process of elimination, I agree with you. I would go Thomas, Buchnevich, Snuggerud. Like, no matter what we think, hockey is still a fairly random game. Buchnevich and Thomas skating around 21 minutes a game plus in the first two games. Snuggerud a little over 18. So that's, Snuggerud at 18, the other two at 21 plus. Perfectly correlated at home for 14,200. Like, I think I prefer Thomas Buchnevich Snuggerud, and honestly, it's not even close. Just because the second and third lines just can't do anything. The top line is going to get a ton of minutes, and they're only 14,200. Like, that's honestly, they are going to be very, very, very chalky. But at 14,200, you get one correlated goal, you get one empty netter, you're kind of fine. So I think St. Louis won pretty easily for me. On the Winnipeg side, like, it's one of those things, like, eventually one of those depth lines is going to break through. When is it going to happen? Who knows? I would probably lead. I don't mind Winnipeg 3 at 8,900. Lowry, Appleton, and Tanev. Those are guys that play with the empty net. And if this is going to be a low-scoring affair, which, I think the two teams are combined for a 5.3 game total, so it seems that way. If it's 3-1 or 2-0 or whatever late in the game, Lowry and Appleton and Tanev are, at the minimum, Lowry and Appleton are going to get ice time with the empty net. And that's always a plus when you're looking at depth guys. That line's only 8,900. 21 shot attempts for, 14 against in their 20 minutes in the two games in Winnipeg. They're fairly dominant. They combined for 23 shot attempts between the three of them in those two games. 12 shot attempts a game for the third line is not bad. So they're creating some offense. They're going to play with the empty net. I honestly don't mind Winnipeg 3. I think Winnipeg 1 is my favorite line in this game. Honestly, at 18,700, like, it's not that they're unplayable. I think at that point I would probably just find the $1,500 or whatever and go play Minnesota. So, I don't really have a ton of interest in Winnipeg 1. It's not that they're a bad player or whatever. Like, they do have the fourth highest top 2 stack. They have positive leverage. They're perfectly fine. I just think this is a game where I'm going to look for cheap players on the Winnipeg side rather than the top guys. And then on the St. Louis side, I'll go play the top guys and then leave the cheap guys alone.
Yep. Out of all the games, which do you see as the highest scoring? I think it's either, if Cirelli's out, you can make a case for Panthers Lightning. I think it's Leafs Senators, but one of those two.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the Eastern Conference games. I would lean to Ottawa Toronto just because it's the perfect storm of both, one with an elite power play, one with a pretty good power play, and both teams with terrible penalty kills. Like, it's one of those games, like, there are 4 power play goals. There's one empty netter. There's a couple at even strength. Maybe somebody donks one shorthanded. It's 5-3 or something like that. You know what I mean? So, yeah, probably Ottawa Toronto.
Let's talk about defensemen. Dogs are idiots. At the top of the board, 5K to 6K, we have Hedman, Morrissey, Sanderson, Theodore, Chabot, Jones. It's like, I think, like, Hedman played 21 minutes in game 1. I don't mind going back to Hedman here. I think my favorite play, though, in this top range would be Sanderson, just from the fact that he plays 25 to 27 minutes. Like, he's going to get those minutes. Hedman was 21. Morrissey was, 20, like 21, 22. Shea Theodore played 16 minutes the other night. So,
and he looked terrible.
Oh, yeah. He was
like shades of Darnell Nurse.
Yeah. So, like, honestly, I like if you want to rank Hedman 1, I think that's fine because, that's fine. But for me, I'm going to go Sanderson 1, Hedman 2, Chabot 3. Chabot even plays like 25 minutes. He doesn't get the power play time, but he's 5,100. So it would be the Ottawa guys who are my favorite in the top range.
Yeah, Ottawa's doing what Minnesota does with their defensemen, which is play their top four 21 to 28 minutes. And then the third pair gets like 10 to 11. Yeah, Hedman's the only guy 6K and above. I do prefer Sanderson. Both him and Chabot have point per dollar values. I'll bring up the projections here. Of the guys over 5K, they both have the top point per dollar values at 2.09 DK points per thousand, easily leading the way for the expensive defenseman. I prefer Sanderson. Again, I think this is a special team series, but both very much in play. Colton Parayko, I always say it, as long as he's under 5K, he's playable. Gustav Forsling, getting decent ice time for Florida, I think he's playable. Noah Hannafin, I thought, like, for as bad as Theodore has looked at times this series, I've thought Hannafin and even Pietrangelo have looked fine. I don't mind Noah Hannafin. There's some decent, relatively cheap guys here tonight. I don't mind Cam Fowler. Neil Pionk. The Winnipeg second power play unit, I always say it was one of the best second power play units in the league this season. Like, I don't play a guy because he plays secondary power play minutes, but he is getting decent ice time, and his defense pair has been probably Winnipeg's best defense pair in the first two games. Artem Zub is projecting well. So is Jared Spurgeon. Under 3K, Nico Mikkola. Again, this is the last game without Aaron Ekblad, so Mikkola is probably going to be around 20 minutes again. Zach Whitecloud, I think, is fine. Zeev Buyum, found out how to pronounce that correctly. He was top power play in the last game for Minnesota. Now, he only played 14 minutes, and it was only one. They only had one power play. So who knows if they change anything, but they got to try something because the power play has been pretty lifeless basically all season. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him back on the power play. And, even if it's only 14 minutes, top power play for under 3K, hard to hate that.
Yep. Let's talk about goalies here. Different locations now for most of these teams. I would imagine Vegas goes back to Aiden Hill. Not my favorite. I have no issue going to Hellebuck at 8K. I think going back to Vasilevsky is fine at 7,900. I do worry a little bit about Cirelli being out, but if he is out, he may see an uptick in volume. Like, as much as I want the Sens to win, Stellaris has looked great, and if he can power bomb Ridley Greig in his paint and get away with it, you might as well take another shot at Stellaris. For cheap, it would be Gustafsson. The dogs agree. I don't mind Bennington, but I think it would be Gustafsson for cheap.
Yeah. Vasilevsky has the top projection, but it's not by much. Him and Linus Ullmark are pretty close by point per dollar. I would prefer Vasilevsky. I know he got absolutely lit up in the last game. Again, I don't think Florida's going to score 3 power play goals a game. Tampa Bay's typically had a pretty good PK this year. So Vasilevsky and then Stolarz for me. I mean, Connor Hellebuck, 8K on the road, I think is a little expensive, but again, like he's going to be the goalie of the year. So like I have no problem playing Hellebuck, but I think it's Vasilevsky and Stolarz. Bennington, I think, is very playable. I would probably go Gustafsson. Minnesota at home. I said it on the other show, if Minnesota can play as they did in the first 10 weeks of the season, they're a great team and a team that can limit shot quality and make life easy on Gustafsson, especially where Vegas doesn't draw a ton of power plays. So I think Gustafsson would be the cheap goalie for me.
Yep. Not 100% sure that we're going to be back tomorrow. GK hasn't released GPPs yet. It's not a 4-game slate. We'll let you know in the morning what's going on. Who are you liking for your hat trick pick?
Go Leafs, go. John Tavares.
Go Leafs, go. I picked the Blues to win the series, but I'm going Cole Perfidi here. in his 14 minutes of ice time. But he is power play 1, and the Blues
Yeah.
can't stop a nosebleed on the power play. Penalty kill. So
I like it.
if we're not back tomorrow, we will be. We should be back on Saturday. I don't want to like 100% commit to anything because who knows what DraftKings is going to do. But
I mean,
we'll try to.
I mean, we'll be here on Saturday. It's just tomorrow. Tomorrow's up in the air because it's a 3-gamer, and the contests have been slowly dwindling since the start of the playoffs.
Yeah, so we'll definitely be back on Saturday. Tomorrow is up in the air, but good luck everybody tonight. Enjoy your playoff hockey, and we'll potentially see you tomorrow.
Good luck tonight, everybody.